What do libertarians really want? Well, this is actually an ongoing debate. However, I think there are a few basic things that all libertarians want regardless of being left or right. I think we can agree that all libertarians want the following: personal autonomy. No one else can dictate any aspect of my or anyone else's personal life or personal business, provided that such personal affairs do not come to the harm of anyone else. Freedom of choice. Choice and control over what goes into my body, whether it be medical or consumable food product. Choice and control over my own money, not to be burdened by compulsory taxation. Freedom of speech. Free and open press where views and sponsorship are determined 100% by meritocratic means rather than special interest or coercive means. Free movement and association. As Milton Friedman said, you can have welfare or you can have open borders, but you cannot sustainably have both. I say we have neither. I will now expand upon each of these points a little further and give specific examples. For personal autonomy, I mean to say that whereabouts which concern only single individuals are not to be ever regulated or legislated against. Elimination of the state would greatly help with this goal. Abortion is to remain legal and acceptable at all times, as are the use of all and any drugs. Risks associated with all these elective body choices should be noted. However, it is noted that any individual who will not listen to the risks and warnings associated with drugs like cocaine, heroin, and meth are also unlikely to be persuaded by the threat of imprisonment, as their risk assessment judgment is already significantly impaired. Thus, legalizing all of these activities is the only sane option, as creating laws that attempt to enforce and remove the use of these drugs will cost a lot of money and will not yield good results. We already can see this from the failed drug war. Freedom of choice in regards to money is very important. We as a society should not be compelled to pay for infrastructure which we don't see an honest need for repairs or don't see any personal benefit. For example, a large company can lobby the government to repair and completely replace a road which has only minor damages, i.e., small cracking, at the expense of the taxpayer. You can see how they might want to use this public money, as the compulsory corporate donation to government is much higher than the individual citizen. But if they were simply allowed to keep all the money they pay in taxes, commercial property taxes, which are very high, and other business taxes, they'd be much more equipped to pay for the roads themselves. They'd also lack this moralistic argument of having paid higher amounts, thus being owed money for these roads which benefit their private business more than the general public. The road which is in minor damage shouldn't be forcibly funded by taxation. The private individual will also have more money when their income and property isn't taxed, so voluntary road work petitions will be more realistically pursued for residential roads. I will get into full details of how such a voluntary road construction funding company could work, but basically it would be a more contractual version of like a GoFundMe. Freedom of choice is also super relevant right now to this COVID-19 crisis. In many counties and some whole states, mask wearing is now fully required and compulsory. Firstly, I will say that I believe that masks can actually work. I've looked at the empirical evidence for this and it is true to the best of my knowledge. I will have a link to the video in the description. But if you look at the statistics, even if you take their very numbers for face value, this disease is only 50% worse than the flu. I will also leave a link in the description to Larkin Rose's video where he breaks down the statistics. Are we all to be required to wear face masks for every tiny viral outbreak? If this is the case, when will we ever be allowed to not wear face masks? Masks might only be a minor inconvenience in most cases, but they can still obstruct business to some degree. I know from my experience at work that with everyone wearing masks, employees and customers alike, the end result is a bunch of Kennys from South Park trying to have conversations with one another, basically saying, what is this saying? What'd you say? I said I want Newport 100s. Oh, I'll get right to it. I can recall an instance where my supervisor decided to remove her mask because a customer could not hear her speaking correctly. Remember that everything has economic costs, and if the costs outweigh the benefits, then it's not worth pursuing. I am very pro free speech. I am very concerned with the direction that platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter are taking with removing inconvenient or quote unquote wrong opinions from their platforms. I recognize that these are private firms who own their private property, but they are also publicly subsidized by government. They do receive tax breaks and public funding. Why should they be allowed to pull down videos? Hopefully the market will solve this problem. I'm rooting for other platforms like LBRY and BitChute. This problem can be solved easily by keeping the internet press market free and open so people will flock to platforms which offer the best content creator-friendly environments. My last point is free movement and association. We should be able to associate and dissociate from anyone we want. I even support the right of an employer to fire or hire employees based on admittedly silly things like sexuality, though I find it to be unpragmatic on the employer's part to fire a good employee for something as silly as being gay. We still cannot tell that employer how to spend his or her money. That's a violation of their rights. I can tell you from experience that working in an environment where you don't fit in socially is a high stress, high tension environment for all the wrong reasons. Why would you, a gay person, want to work in an environment that's aggressive to homosexuality in the first place? If that employer is not allowed to fire you for being gay, they will probably just find another reason to fire you, or if they can't, you'll be stuck working in a hostile environment where no one wants you around. That just doesn't sound like a good situation. You can't legislate how people think about things. You can only try to convince them to think a different way. Remember that. As far as free movement, border control is really only necessary while an overarching welfare state exists. Eliminate the welfare state and restore the mutual aid programs that existed before the compulsory system, and this problem solves itself. You think that people won't voluntarily help one another. Your view is in direct conflict with history. People will come to realize that mutual aid and insurance is in their own self-interest and consequently will pursue those options. The private welfare systems that are employed will consequently only help those who truly need help, as to do otherwise will cause the voluntary funding to cease. Public welfare, which is compulsory, funded via taxation, has no such incentive, so it ends up funding the lazy, the underproductive, or the willfully unemployed. We also have the empirical evidence that suggests that funding the unproductive and penalizing the productive has a consequence of an ever-increasing number of unproductive people and a decreasing of the number of productive people. For more details on this matter, please cite For a New Liberty, The Libertarian Manifesto by Murray Rothbard. Well, there you have it. This is what libertarians want. We want the freedom to choose and believe that the consequence of this freedom will generally produce the best outcomes given enough time.